tonight Dr. Weigold. It is my honor to introduce him. Dr. Weigold is a board-certified psychiatrist who's been in Riverside County for 14 years. Man, that's a long time. Working with Dr. Weigold makes it seem like it's been much, much longer. He's worked at our county as a psychiatrist, at the hospital, at ITF, and many of our outpatient clinics, including New Life, KFSP, and the county HIV clinic, and also Blaine, Banning, Corona, Hemet, and other clinics. That makes it seem like nobody wants it, right? He's now working with one of our very innovative programs called Mobile Psychiatric Services. Although the service is mobile, it is not the same as our mobile response team. MPS is not a crisis service. If you want, we can schedule a later meeting just to discuss what all our services in crisis support system of care. Like I said, MPS is not a crisis service. It is an ongoing outpatient behavioral health services that prioritizes those consumers who have been needing an excessive number of crisis services in recent months. The cycle in and out of the hospital, frequent visits, frequent hospitalizations. MPS takes clinic services to your loved one until the situation can be stabilized enough that your loved one can again start using a regular clinic. Our homeless population with many different hits in the hospital without needing excessive crisis services. If Dr. Weigold ever does decide to leave us, it probably won't be until after this building has crumbled to dust. Oh, by the way, he did go to school, so we'll cover that. The boring stuff. He graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in psychology, med school at Michigan State University, and psychiatry residency at the University of New Mexico. Well, if that ain't enough, he's definitely certified to be here tonight.
Or certifiable. So, tonight we've got a couple different things, several different presenters. My first opportunity is to introduce Dr. Monica Tone. She joined us in January as the Associate Medical Director for our Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Programs, and also as the Associate Program Director for the Psychiatry Residency, training our next generation of psychiatrists. She went to Loma Linda School of Medicine. She has psychiatry residency at Case Western in Cleveland, and 2 different fellowships, one in addiction psychiatry and one in public and community psychiatry. She's smart, funny, with a wonderful family that she needs to get home to, which is why I'm doing this up front, which includes 2 small boys. But I have to warn you about something. She's Canadian. Sorry, I didn't get to choose. Okay, so let me turn it over for just a minute to Dr. Tone so that she can tell you about her new role in our county.
Thank you, Dr. Weigold. Hi, everyone. So I just joined the county in January, so I'm new to the county and very excited to be here. As Dr. Weigold said, I'm with the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Program. So my background is working with addictions, and in the past I've worked inpatient and outpatient. Here I'm primarily working to expand our medication for addiction treatment program. So that's medications like Suboxone and Vivitrol, life-saving medications for addiction. So we're looking at trying to get as many people connected with these services, as well as treating the mental health component of addictions too. So because of addiction psychiatrist, I focus on both, and the mental health is a huge part of recovery. So I've been working with the SAPT program and gradually trying to increase our services there. And we're also working with the rest of the county in projects like trying to increase the use of MAT in detention and those types of settings. So I'm really excited to be here. I think there's lots of good work to be done and great people to work with, like Dr. Weigold. So I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you for allowing me to be here and introduce myself.
Good evening, everybody. How is everybody doing? Good. My name is Willard Wynn, and I am the new program manager for Family Advocate Program. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tone, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate you. So, Family Advocate Program, we are doing these presentations to inform our community, right? It's very important that we keep our communities informed and our families locked in. So the only way that we can get better at what we're doing is staying locked into each other and learning new techniques. So I'm so glad that the medical staff has been here. It kind of solidifies what we're doing as a program. So moving forward, I have Alicia Hermosillo is going to come up and she's going to introduce our first speaker. Alicia.
Good evening, everyone. As Will said, my name is Alicia Hermosillo. I'm the Senior Family Advocate out in the Mid-County region. And one of the main reasons why I came today was because Christina, who is sitting right here on my left, is a family member that I've been working with for quite some time now. We worked together with one of our liaisons. His name is Aurelio Sanchez. He is our veteran. He couldn't be here tonight. He really wanted to be here today, but he wasn't able to. But we worked together with this family in trying to help her son that was having challenges with mental health and addiction. One important factor that I just wanted to mention is that sometimes it's really hard for us to be able to help our families when they're not connected into services. And when Christina came to us, she came through a CBAT referral. CBAT is our crisis teams, the ones that are out in the community working with law enforcement. They had multiple contacts with her son, and they reached out to me and asked if I can please connect with this family and try to help them out. At the time though, because her son was not connected to mental health or any of our programs, it becomes a little bit hard for us, right, to be able to reach out. I'm sure you've all heard this, well, as long as it's not voluntary, you know, if he doesn't willingly come in, there's not much we can do, right? You've heard that. So we kind of worked a little bit out of the box in this particular situation because we knew the need and we knew that law enforcement was really on this in terms of helping this gentleman, this young man. They saw the need in him, they knew his history, and they were like just pleading, like, please help him out. So we were able to set up a home visit with Miss Christina and her son. At one point with Aurelio Sanchez, again, our veterans liaison, and that's how we began our journey with this family. So I just want to introduce to you Miss Christina, that so gracefully, I know this is going to be hard for her, but we're all here to support her, which is what I told her, you're not alone. You got all of us here supporting you, and she's here to share a little bit about her story with her son, her journey. Thank you.
We put him in soccer hoping he would burn a lot of that energy, but he still had plenty left over. Over the years, he was athletic in baseball, soccer, skateboarding, football, and wrestling. He also loved playing music, instruments like the violin, saxophone, guitar, and piano. Something he was really good at, and beat almost anyone he played, was a game of chess. Academically, Ernie did very well in school. He had a big heart and was so giving to others who were in more need than him. Joining the military was a family tradition for Ernie. It was something he was destined to do from an early age. After graduating in 2012 from Temecula Valley High School, he joined the Marine Corps. He wanted to see the world and be among other Marines just as his family members did. His job in the Corps was communications. While he was overseas, he made sure to check in on his little brother often. Ernie and his little brother, Vincent, had a special bond, even though there was such a big age difference. Ernie was our protector, whether he was overseas or at home. He had some struggles along the way, which led him to being released early. When he was back home, I noticed changes in his mood, sleep, and emotional well-being. One day he came to me and started banging his head on the wall, crying out to me that he couldn't get rid of the voices in his head. And so he asked me to take him to the VA for help. This was the first of 5150 holds. In the beginning of his diagnosis of bipolar and schizophrenia, he took his meds. He did pretty good. He took them. He could tell it was helping, but complained about its side effects often. He never really had ongoing therapy. It was sporadic. He wanted to be an electrician like his uncle, so he attended a trade school near the VA. That way he was close to VA classes and school. He was living on his own with my support. He would always mention being most comfortable around others like him at the VA, so I did everything I could to keep him close to treatment and school. There came a time when I think he thought he could get better on his own, so he started self-medicating. At this time, I was aware of his marijuana use, and then later came meth. Unfortunately, there were multiple 5150, 5250 holds, and incarcerations. With his dual diagnosis, it was hard for him to keep a job, keep good friends, and be independent. He would want to be alone rather than be social. His depression got worse each day. And so when the VA didn't work out, I felt hopeless and so lost, not knowing where my son was going to get the help he so badly needed. So I brought him back home to live with us when he was unable to make choices for himself. He ran into many encounters with law enforcement, but when I would talk to them about Ernie, they knew he was a good person who needed help. One of them told me Ernie always waved and smiled at them when others would run. They soon realized his struggles with mental health and substance abuse. And like Alicia had mentioned, the special team called the CBAT team at Riverside Sheriff Station put me in contact with Riverside Mental Health and put me in contact with the Riverside Mental Health family advocates during one of his last times he was detained. I finally felt like help was on its way for him and myself and our family. With the help from the family advocates, Ernie was offered mental health court. Ernie always mentioned to me that everyone on his team at the Riverside Mental Health really made him feel like they genuinely wanted to help him. When he made that comment when he was clear and medicated. And he knew he had a lot of work to put in towards it, and he was just starting to engage in the programs available for people like him. He was on his way to something better until fentanyl took him from me. People are dying every day from fentanyl. Whether it's a pill unknowingly or whether it's someone who is just plain and simply addicted to it. Because that's what's available on our streets and on social media now. It's so easy to get. I feel there needs to be more education and awareness at an early age. And so I hope that we can all talk to our friends and family, coworkers, neighbors about this lethal drug. Because my son was sick. He didn't want to die, but fentanyl killed him. So on behalf of myself, Ernie, and our family, we would like to thank the Riverside Behavioral Health, especially Alicia, Aurelio, Willard, and Terry for giving us hope during our time of need.
So tonight, I want to make sure that we cover and answer these particular 4 questions. What is the problem? Why is fentanyl so deadly? And why are so many people dying? And how do opioids, including fentanyl, actually cause addiction? So if we just take a look at the overdose deaths since 1980, you see that there's a slow rise going on until just about 1990, and it takes an upward trend there. But then in just the last couple of years, you see that it absolutely skyrockets. The New York Times reported just this month that after a catastrophic increase in 2020, in 2021, there was another record-breaking increase to an estimated 108,000 overdose deaths in just the 1 year. And this is all part of the ever-worsening fentanyl crisis. In fact, the Riverside County produced a committee to combat fentanyl abuse. I know you can't see much of that, but in July 2021, they started a fentanyl abuse awareness campaign. And many of you saw just last week in the headlines that a bus driver from a local school was accused of giving out fentanyl to students at this special needs school. I don't know how much worse it can get. So let's talk a little bit about why is fentanyl so deadly. The biggest problem here is that it is so much more potent. It's simply stronger than almost all the other opioid pain medications on the market. And that simply means that it takes much less of fentanyl to get the same effect. Even a slight mistake in the manufacturing or in the intake can lead to an overdose and death. So how does fentanyl compare to heroin regarding a potentially deadly dose? Well, I want you to take a look at this picture of two identical vials, one that contains a potentially lethal dose of heroin and one that contains a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. You can barely even see the fentanyl. If you change this to comparing it to a simple penny, the same amount you saw in that vial is right there next to the penny. And if we zoom in on that, those few crystals, if we gathered them together, would just about cover only the date on that penny. And that's a potentially lethal dose. I keep saying potentially because, of course, it depends on the person, their tolerance, how much they've been using, all of that stuff. But this is a potentially lethal dose. So, but then why are so many people dying of it? Fentanyl's been around for a long time. It's actually a very useful prescribed medication in particular circumstances. But why has it changed? Why are so many people dying now? It's cheap and it's profitable for the dealers. As a result, they're putting it in everything. So there are people who are intentionally trying to buy fentanyl. But there are lots of people who think that they're buying heroin, or they're buying Norcos, or Vicodin, or any of the other opiate pain medications. And sometimes when people think that they're buying cocaine, or PCP, or Xanax, it's actually either completely fentanyl or at least partially fentanyl. In Alaska, pretty far out, very rural state, of the 140 fentanyl overdose deaths that were recorded, 60% also involved meth, and 30% involved heroin. All right, why am I suddenly talking about meth and heroin? Again, because people are either using more than one thing, or it's in everything. Fentanyl is showing up in all sorts of drugs. That people think they're buying one drug, but they're actually buying at least some fentanyl. Dealers are adding fentanyl to these other drugs in order to boost the high. So they are selling, let's say you think you're buying 2 milligrams of Xanax. You're actually buying 1 milligram of Xanax and a tiny little bit of fentanyl. The dealer gets to charge you for 2 milligrams of Xanax and a couple of pennies worth of the fentanyl. So they use it to boost the high, But that means a lot of people don't even know that they're taking fentanyl. They're adding fentanyl to all of these other street drugs. If you're using any sort of drug that's not from a legitimate source, it's not, you didn't directly get it from a pharmacy. You may think that your friend is giving you one of their Xanax or giving you one of their Norcos. But that person bought it from somebody else, not from a pharmacy, and they may not even know, as your friend, that they're accidentally giving you fentanyl. So I want to real quick review the answers to that. Why are so many people dying? Simply, it's so much more potent, and because it's now in everything. It's all over the place. In fact, the Riverside County District Attorney's Office started making these bumper stickers. What's in your pills? Fentanyl kills. To simply get the idea out there that just because you don't think you're using fentanyl doesn't mean you're not getting it. It could be in anything you got your hands on. It wasn't directly from a pharmacy. So what is this stuff? What is fentanyl? It is simply an opioid pain medication. Chemically very, very similar to opium, morphine, heroin, Demerol, all of these. And an opioid is simply any pain-relieving chemical that's related to the extract from the opium poppy flower. Yeah, I'm serious, flowers. A poppy flower. Now, this is not the poppies that are in your backyard or your neighbor's garden. Opium poppies are not randomly in people's backyards, don't worry. It's a very specific kind of poppy. And as you might gather, they don't sell it in the seed section at Lowe's. But this is an opium farmer. They wait until the seed buds, the flower buds of the opium poppy are full. They cut small slits in the side, and you can see the sap oozing out of the side. That's what gets collected, turned into opium, and then can be turned into all these other opioid pain medications. Some of you may even be as old as me and remember this image. From the movie The Wizard of Oz, our heroes are on their way to stop the Wicked Witch's work, and she needs to slow them down. And you may remember her screaming, "Poppies, poppies will put them to sleep." It's a direct reference to opium poppies. That's the only reason why poppies are mentioned in that scene. And when the book was published, there was a very big opium trade around the world. So fentanyl is nothing more than an opioid, but why is it so common now? Again, because the dealers found it as a cheap and easy way, but now they make it from chemicals not from the opium flower. They don't need the opium from poppies anymore. They can make it from chemicals that you can buy from scientific labs around the world. They simply don't need the poppies anymore, and they start with a raw chemical. The most common one is piperidine. Who cares? Piperidine, what is that? Well, it turns out piperidine is a non-opioid chemical. It's part of the reason why it's legally and freely sold. And it's used in all sorts of chemical processes, including the ones you see here. And the last one that you notice there is making non-opioid medications. There are lots of them. Piperidine is part of the chemical processing and development of all these different medications. You may recognize a few of them here, including Paxil and Ritalin. It's also involved in making these other medications, including some of our antipsychotics. One of the most common ones a lot of you have heard of is Risperdal. Piperidine is one of the base chemicals that's used to create all these other different compounds. But then again, it's also used in manufacturing these other opioid pain medications that are prescriptions. Fentanyl, of course, is what we're talking about tonight. But I also want to show you that it's involved in making Imodium. Yeah, the diarrhea medication. Imodium, loperamide, is actually an opioid chemical. And if you want, I can explain later why that's sold freely at the pharmacy and all that kind of stuff. But it is actually an opioid chemical. So an opioid blocks the pain signals going to the brain. Well, that's a good thing. The chemical also activates the reward system of your brain, and so it makes the experience of taking this chemical feel good. But then this is a chemical to which we can become tolerant, meaning you need to take more and more and more over time to get the same effect. That's no longer good. We've got a problem going at that point. But in addition to all that, opioid chemicals suppress the signals to breathe. Yeah, that's bad. This is what causes people to die from an opioid overdose, whether it's fentanyl or any other opioid. By stopping the signal to breathe, your body just quits doing it. And if you're already asleep from the other effects of the opioid, you don't even know that you've stopped breathing. Now, one of the important things about this is that this is a chemical, all the opioids are chemicals that can be blocked by another medication called naloxone. You're going to hear a lot more about that in a few minutes. That's a good thing. So, now we start the science class. So, first of all, I want you to relax. Don't worry. The exam at the end will only determine your cost for tonight's presentation. No, really. There's going to be a lot of science in just a couple of minutes, but we're going to go through it piece by piece. You're not going to have any problem with it. So, how do the opioid chemicals become addictive? All right, so this is an image of a brain. Just to make sure we're all oriented, if we took my head and sliced it this way and turned me this way, you're looking from my left, that's what my brain would look like. Well, mine would be smaller. So, a couple of things. This particular little orange dot is called the ventral tegmental area, or simply VTA. And I'll explain in a moment why that's important. But when that is activated, it throws a neurotransmitter chemical called dopamine onto this one called the nucleus accumbens, or NA. Why is all that important? Because the nucleus accumbens is your pleasure center. Anything that activates the nucleus accumbens will make you feel good and like you want to do that thing again, whatever it is. It could be gambling, it could be a fantastic steak dinner, or it could be fentanyl. They all use the same pathway. The nucleus accumbens then sends signals out to your prefrontal cortex, this area up here. This is where you make decisions. This is where you make judgments. And this is where you decide what you're going to do next. Well, if I activate your nucleus accumbens really big, I light it up really big, those signals to your prefrontal cortex will tell you, we have to do that again. But I'm hungry, I haven't eaten today. Doesn't matter, we're going to do that again. But I haven't had any what? Doesn't matter, we're going to do that again. It hijacks all of your decision making. So, anything that is highly activating to the nucleus accumbens can result in addictive behavior. Now, that doesn't mean it will for everybody, but for a certain percentage it will. You've seen some people go to a casino and they play for a little while and they're done. Me, I take $20, I lose it, and I'm really upset that I lost $20. Even if I went up a couple $100 in between, if I end up with my $20 gone, I had a bad day. I'm not a good gambler. The casinos don't like me. For me, that doesn't happen to be addictive. It doesn't light up my nucleus accumbens. My fear of the loss is much greater than my activation of the nucleus accumbens. So people are different as to what's going to light it up really big, but if it lights up really big, you're liable to end up in trouble. Okay, so we talked about the VTA, dumps dopamine onto the nucleus accumbens, sends signals to the prefrontal cortex. We okay? Questions about that so far? Yeah, pretty straightforward. So, how do the opioids, including fentanyl, come into this picture? They directly activate the ventral tegmental area. And once that happens, what else happens next? The whole rest of the cycle. Okay? So, what in the world do we do? Oh, one other thing. In addition to lighting up the VTA, we mentioned, they stop the signal to breathe. Now that's only if you get a very high dose. A lot of us have taken Norco or Vicodin or something else along the way, and it didn't stop our signal to breathe. But if you get too much of any of these opioids, it will also stop your signal to breathe. But we can block all this right here, right before it activates the ventral tegmental area. We can block that with a medication called naloxone. Some of you have heard about this. The most common brand name is Narcan. But you can see why this is such an important step, why this chemical is so important to have around, where there are people who might be using any of the opioids, but especially including fentanyl. All right, honestly, that's it. That's all the science you need. Any questions about that cycle? You don't need to remember the names of the brain areas, but if you can remember just a little bit of that picture, you'll have an understanding of how this whole cycle works. And of course, too much opioid stops breathing, and you end up dead. All right, so how do you save a person who's overdosing on an opioid like fentanyl? We give naloxone to restart the breathing signal. It's that easy to save a life. So before we go on with second presenter, who should be arriving just any moment now, what questions about what we've talked about so far tonight? Yes?
I had heard that for the Narcan you don't have to have a prescription. Is that true? I went to Sam's to ask and they told me I could get a standing order, a standing sign. It was like $144.
Right. To get Narcan, you do not have to have a prescription. That is correct. California is certainly out in front on this, but a lot of states, you do not have to have a prescription to get Narcan. And that only makes sense. I mean, if you needed a prescription to have Narcan, it would be of no use. We have to have it out in the community for it to work. Nowadays, most police departments are carrying Narcan, in addition to, of course, all the EMS units. A lot of different staff from RUHS Behavioral Health have Narcan. Nope, there's one right back there, tied. Good. Because we don't know when we're going to end up in front of an overdose. Let me go back, I didn't mean to hit that. What other questions about what we've talked about so far? Really?
Is it more expensive than the drug itself?
You have a question now?
So yeah, Narcan is more expensive than the drug itself. But there are lots of ways that can be handled. Just like with any medication. How many of us walk into Walgreens and say, you know, I have this prescription for an antibiotic, I just want to pay the full retail cost. I don't want to use my insurance. Very few of us do that.
We have a question right here.
Oh, yes.
Como que el fentanilo causa cuando la gente fallece que deja de respirar.
So fentanyl causes that someone to stop breathing when they use it? Does fentanyl cause for someone to stop breathing when they use it?
Y por eso muere.
And is that why they die?
Yes, the fentanyl or any other opioid medication, the fentanyl, Norco, Vicodin, methadone, any of those, if it's a very high amount for that person, it can cause their breathing to stop. Yes, the fentanyl effect of causing you to stop breathing, yes, that is how they die.
¿Qué órganos ataca o
Which organs does it damage?
None of the organ damage is what causes the death. The stopping the brain's signal to breathe is what causes death. But I'm not sure if I answered your question.
So they suffocate? Do they stop
Yes.
breathing and that's the cause of death?
Right, they suffocate because their brain has just stopped wanting to breathe.
So then they stop breathing and then they die.
That's right. That's right. Somebody who's overdosing on fentanyl or any of the opioid chemicals, if it's way too much, it can cause them to just stop breathing. And then, of course, they will eventually die in the next few minutes. Yeah.
¿Y cómo son los síntomas cuando empiezan a...
What would be the symptoms when they stop breathing? How would I be able to know?
Now, we're going to go over that a little bit more with the next presenter. But basically, you will see that their chest is no longer rising and falling. Their lips will become blue. You can literally, put your hand in front of their mouth and nose. But if you suspect any of this, you can use naloxone, the brand name Narcan. And if they're not overdosing on an opioid, the Narcan will not hurt them. You can't do any damage by giving the naloxone.
¿Cómo se puede uno dar cuenta de que una persona está sufriendo eso?
What I would like to know is how would I be able to know that someone is suffering from an overdose?
The easiest answer is you don't have to know. If you have any suspicion, if you simply can't wake them up, you can use the Narcan while you're calling 911. If it was because of an overdose of an opioid, you may well save their life, but you have 911 already on the way for that or any other reason that you can't wake them up.
Pero si, o sea que todo transcurre como en un sueño, o sea cuando están dormidos, no se puede uno dar cuenta antes de que ellos estén así como dormidos, de que ellos están sufriendo de una sobredosis.
So this all happens while they're sleeping. If they're sleeping, I wouldn't be able to see. I wouldn't be able to see that they have stopped breathing.
Well, I mean, you might notice that their chest is no longer moving, their lips turn blue, but if you cannot wake them up, that's as much reason as you need to go ahead and give the naloxone.
Dr. Weigold, I think that what she's trying to get to is that that when they're doing the drug, I guess they're not having a seizure or something like that. That's what she wants to know.
Okay.
She'll be able to tell, like, my kid just did it. Is there a symptom before they just fall asleep and stop breathing?
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was asking.
Okay.
Is there a way for me to know that someone has used before they would actually go on to sleep?
There's no good way to know before. But if somebody is asleep and you cannot wake them up, that's all the reason you need to go ahead and give the naloxone. Now I'm going to ask if I can take a question over here real quick. If you have more, I'll certainly come back. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a question pertaining to the time frame per se. I know everyone is different with medication and the individual is different. Does the statistic indicate that the time frames, like they've used it for 2 months, 6 months, or a year? Does it say anything about that?
So, if I heard you right, you're asking about how much the length of their use,
Yes.
the amount of weeks and months that they've been using, affects whether they're going to overdose. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Certainly, as somebody becomes accustomed to using this or any other opioid chemical, their tolerance, how much it takes for them to get the same effect, starts to rise. But they can still overdose even if they've been using for years and years. And of course, if they didn't know that they were taking fentanyl because it's hidden in one of these other things, all bets are off. And if somebody has stopped using this or other opioid chemicals for a couple of weeks, their tolerance has dropped down. The amount that they used to use just to feel good may now suddenly be deadly. Does that help?
Yes, sir, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take a couple more and then we're going to switch over to our other speaker.
How much Narcan, like the nasal, how much is it safe to use?
It's okay. It's a single dose. We're going to explain all that in just a couple minutes. The how to go about using it, the reasons why it's the thing to use. But thank you. There was one more question over here. Yes.
So sometimes when you're working with the families and the clients, right, and there's a dual diagnosis. I think there's a misconception of, oh, okay, they're using a lot of Xanax. You can't use Narcan in it. But I guess now with what you're saying, they should, because we don't know if that Xanax has been laced with fentanyl.
Well, that's right. One of the things that has changed in the picture. I'm sorry. Let me restate your question. See if I got it right. There has previously been the thought that I don't need Narcan around because my family member uses Xanax or uses alcohol or uses heroin, not fentanyl. So I don't need Narcan around. And you're asking if now that has changed because it's in everything. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah. And so yes, this is a big part of what's changed the picture. Because it's in all kinds of things. And so many people are dying of fentanyl overdose and they have no idea that they took fentanyl. They did not intentionally take fentanyl. They thought they were taking cocaine, PCP, Xanax, all kinds of things. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here and have our next presenter introduced. Thank you.